Oggetti Socievoli.
Oggetti Socievoli presenta.
A Conversation With is hosted by Prisca Arosio.
My name is Yuka Oyama. I am a visual artist. I work with wearable sculptures and I put them in performance, and I normally film the performance and have photographs. That's a very brief description of what I do. And I'm a German citizen, and I'm originally coming from Japan, and I have lived in many nations from Japan, Indonesia, Malaysia, USA, Germany. And I am also teaching at the HTK Valand in the professor for the craft in Sweden.
So the reason why we invited you is because you study to become a jewellery, but then you actually were interested in objects. And I thought what was really nice in your project was the project that is called The Power of Small Things. So maybe we can talk a bit about that. So if you could give me an introduction of what is the project and also how that relates with your practice.
The artistic research title, The Power of Small Things, it has recently been changing to mobile personal belongings. I think that's better suited. It started in 2017 with one work that is called Help Us Changing Homes. And then the second work is called A Home is a Home is a Home. And the third one is called SurvivaBall Home Suits. I investigate how personal belongings help people to feel anchored or feel grounded, construct a sense of home at the time when they are experiencing extreme uprooting. So meaning in the first work, I worked with 30 people who have experienced more than 30 times of national and international relocations, movings. In the second one, I interviewed also 30 people. This work was worked together with Design School Kolding in Denmark. We interviewed people who commute between cities and countries. And because of the occupation, they have more than one place that they called a home place. In the third volume, I interviewed again 30 people who are young adults, so teenagers, adolescents, who live between two homes, often mom and dad's homes, because they are raised in 50-50 physical split custody. So in all these projects, I question if you have more than one home, or if it's constantly shifting, if home place is not a location bound or geographically bound, how do you make a sense of home? I particularly take a look into how mobile personal belongings, small objects that people carry with them, or the doubles of the identical products, things that you put in all the homes, how they then really make kind of home place.
So your focus is really about the objects and how objects can give to people a sense of home.
Yes, but more about understanding a sense of home in such fluid situation of home places through objects. So it's really about people's way of finding ways to kind of cope with the situation. And my angle of studying into it is through things that accompany people.
Where does this interest come from? Is it from your personal experience?
This comes from my personal experience, definitely. Because I moved around so much in my life, I think in the early 20s, I really confronted the question, so where is my home? And do I have any home place called homeland? At that time, I realized, no, it's a little too early for me to answer these questions. It was too early to deal with such a big thing. And later on, life continued to be very mobile in my biography. And when 3 years ago, I changed my nationality finally to become a German citizen, I had to give up my original Japanese citizenship because the two nations don't have an agreement that you can have a dual citizenships. And then I realized, okay, now I'm ready to deal with this, cope with this question of nationality, question of national identity and homeland, and question of home. So this is very bound to my own personal belongings, and I also commute between places because of my work. So I started to make a kind of an inventory of what are kind of things I'm always carrying in my suitcase, because I fly economy jets, airplanes, and that really does not allow me to bring many things to places. So I started to see what constituting my life, what's making my life. I'm fascinated how objects allow people to do certain experiences. So they give some kind of a jigs. I have the vision of how things should be, but also objects also giving me the routine or this kind of combination of daily experiences or routine in places.
I would like to explore a little bit more this idea of the meaning of home in relation to your object with your work. So what did you discover along the way, also in relation to the interview that you did?
With these minimum things that you have, that starts to really become important essences to make place kind of grounding for yourself. And before, it was a set of people, a set of stable, heavy things like properties, homes, buildings, passports. That in traditions, heritage, anchored people to specific places that crystallized the sense of home. But now it's more like combination of the people. It doesn't have to be that it's somebody who are there in one place, in one city. So you meet combination of people in different cities and they immediately become your family members, even though you have no blood relations to. So because people who you have blood relations to may not necessarily live in the same country, or you don't see them at all too often anymore. So I think it's interesting, this kind of definitions of family, definitions of home become also adjusted or updated. Of course, there is a core sense of home with people with blood relations, but through you live and become adult, that also get changed. But I have been researching, and what has been interesting is what are these kind of things that people carry around. From that perspective, what I can talk about is that I have discovered that there are personal possessions that people carry around, and often they are functional objects like phone, laptops, books. So those are kind of functional things. And then there are also a few things that's personally, emotionally important things. For many children, that's also stuffed animals, or some people say jewelry pieces, because they have many meanings, and personal relations are loaded in jewelry pieces. And they're tiny and you can carry around these everywhere. It has also monetary value. There are also other things like running shoes, music notes, diaries, some also say pillow, that allow you to do certain activities even though you move around a lot. So while you are running, while you're reading, while you're painting, it doesn't matter that outside world is changing, right? You get back to your own routine of practice immediately. So I'm very interested in this. What is this that stay with people and anchor people, even though outside is changing all the time, right? They are especially interesting aspect is if the things are given by somebody else, that's very special. And then that things also allow you to practice something continuous. And that also generates some kind of thoughts. So those become very powerful objects. For example, a camera. One interviewee said a camera that is inherited from her mother who passed away. And she is a photographer and her occupation is to photograph. So document further, produce further to transform what she sees into visible, something visible that she can communicate and also anchor her social status with that, right? So this camera is then really loaded. And what I was also found interesting is those personal possessions that represent someone very special, not functional objects, but something that's psychologically valuable. And I look into what makes these things special. And that often are documentations or remaining or witnesses of the things of specific experiences in the past that has relations to special people. And those special people experiences also have contributed a lot to making the selfhood of the people. So things that remain people of their core, their heritage, making of their identities, family members, or places of origin, and then things that combine both the relations to the people as well as functional objects that allow people to do certain things. So these are kind of things I'm studying through conducting interviews and looking into the results, making artworks, planning performances with people, and all the sculptures that I make are the results of interviews that I conduct with people. And I plan performances with people who I interview. So all the people who perform in my performances are not actors, but they are interviewees, interlocutors of all my interviews.
Why do you use wearable sculpture to express your message?
I'm interested in expressing something very personal about people into the public space, into the public. What is it to almost revealing some secrets of you into public, but without really words? Some visual strangeness, almost humorous, but really like oddity. And I have discovered, and this has always been my part of my study, that the space between the self and outside, that is around the body, on the body, that is my exhibition space. So I make wearable objects that's directly on the human body. And that's where is the area I'm moving around, moving with the people, because I investigate themes about moving around.
So your idea is that you conduct interviews and then you get to know people and what is their objects, personal belongings, which is something that it's around them, that it makes them, that shapes them. And then you want to make it as a wearable sculpture and they wear it and then they go to the public space. And you hope also in a maybe discussion between the public and the person.
I'm more interested in the persons among themselves. So I'm interested in bringing people together who would often never come together. But through that they took part in my work, they come together and they have all shared similar biographical experiences. So through the things, through the objects, social objects, they come together to discuss this, to share those stories. And even though they are disguised in the costumes that you do not see who they are, you cannot distinguish the facial features, they talk about personal stories. So in a way, I'm creating some kind of a strange nation of nomadic people. Often the performances that take place in public just happen. It's not like a performance with the audience that's sitting and expecting things to happen. So you spontaneously, unexpectedly running into these kind of scenes. I think audience member would not understand the full story of what's really going on. In the exhibition spaces, then you see the full story. So then the encounter is a bit different. In the public space, when things just happen without having any information, it just occurs like a maybe strange artwork happening without knowing. And I have until now not announced that this is happening because it's also a moment of filming.
Do people stay in contact after the performances?
Yeah, because we spent a lot of time together, and also through these kind of projects, it's like making a theater or film or production together. So it creates some kind of a very family-like community. People keep contact with me for a very long time. And interestingly, the more sophisticated the structure is of the production, the less I have time with each person. So it will be less contact, and the more chaotic the structure is, the lower budget you have, the more time is demanded from the participants. I have much stronger ties to the participants, but I also hope not to always run very low budget productions.
The SurvivaBall Home Suits, that is the last one that you did that has anything to do with the pandemic?
Unfortunately, it isn't. It is about children who have 2 or 3 or more places that they move around. And that's the connection about, okay, where is this sense of connected home? The pandemic has shaped the forms and materials of this artwork. I wanted to do the filming. I wanted to do the performance indoor in September 2 years ago. And that was still, we did not know what was happening. And the social distance had to be kept 1.5 meters. So this I reflected on the designing of the costumes. That's why it's air bubble spaces. But original idea is I wanted to make a home space that carries one shared air between two homes, between mom and dad's home, for example, that has the same air, because a lot of children have answered that those two homes make one home. They don't consider it like they are separated. So if the parents maintained good enough relationships after their separation and they have a good teamwork to raise children, and a lot of children reacted, the two home places make one home. So if you forget one thing here, you pick it up here. The distance is longer, but it's to some kids, it's just like next door bedroom. You forgot something and from the living room, bring it to bedroom. So their distance between bedroom and the living room, which could be a bit 3 meters, is now expanded to 100 meters. So this is to some children felt that way. Then I felt like, okay, it's a really prolonged, expanded home space. And it's the same air actually, like for the children. So my idea is to have this kind of a cushioning to protect them from bumps. This was the idea for me to use this air materials. Then again, that was also helpful to establish 1.5 meter social distancing through this costume. Because it's children and because in all my work, it's true stories, I hide people's faces. And this is why I make masks and costumes. In terms of this, it also helps that they are completely covered with facial mask. But this is really for that we have to keep the masks on because of COVID. So it does have something to do with COVID, but not about the lockdown experiences.
When they go to school, they have a backpack, then they have to move from one house to another house. Does the backpack become basically the element that goes from one place to another place, so they carry their own personal belongings?
Yes, many children said that the backpack is actually my home too. One child said he keeps everything very special in his backpack because his mother would otherwise throw things away. He doesn't understand the value in stones that he bring home, leaves and, sweets, packagings and all these things. Often adults don't understand that they are important, but for children, they are very important. So something that's very, very special are then kept also in this school backpack.
Do they have actually like the same objects in both homes?
The core, basic needs, yes, like a soccer ball, gloves that they need for playing soccer, a violin or musical instruments. Interestingly, even though the atmosphere of the home are different because it's the two individuals' homes, like a mother's house and father's, they then have different characteristics as differently as people are. They have different atmosphere, right? So then it becomes important that the kids have this plant, this perfume, this light, and this toothpaste and toothbrush. They have to be the same. Then again, it reflects that outside is a bit different, but you have always the same sets of things. And at some point, this came from much older people, like people above 25 years old who lived and finished going between homes. Because once they become 21, 22 or 18 or studying universities, they don't have to do this anymore. They have their own one place. So I have also spoken to several of them who no longer go between and finish these experiences and reflect back on, so what do you learn from it? What is it that important? And they often said some atmospherical things, sensual experiences of the light, smell, sound. So these kind of things they have decided that they have identified later on. Those also become very important essentials to make place one's home. And then the objects are maker of these places. Okay, perfume bottle, incense, these candles, this music, headphones, lots of said headphones. These routines make people forget that you changed homes. Don't realize it. don't want to get under your skin that you changed places. You want to keep on believing it's all the same. That's kind of is the skills to have, isn't it? When we constantly have adjustments, when we constantly have fears, what's going on in the world, the politics situation is not easy. So what is these skills that you have to learn? This is the reason why I'm interested in looking into these kind of objects that give, or things, individual methods, you create some kind of anchoring.
Yes, and also it shapes your identity. So it doesn't matter where you are, you will be that person because you have that things. If you have running shoes, that means I'm a person who runs. It gives you kind of like a security of also the person you are.
And also this continuity, like a practice that demands continuity, like running, repetition of the simple physical gestures. That also create a notion of stability. In this, I have also thought a lot about creating artwork in my own practice. When I was going through many relocations of changing cultures constantly, languages constantly, repeatedly experiencing to be a foreigner, and you don't understand the language, you don't understand nothing, you're always an outsider. But art is something that does not demand words. So I was always fascinated. Art, sports, music, some kind of a physical skills that do not demand word have great value and potential to relocate to different cultures.
Along the way of studying jewelry maker, you started to make objects, make jewelry with your own hand, and there is all the process that you have to talk to people, and then you have to make something that is specifically for them. Do you think this idea of making jewelry and maybe also trying to interact with people and asking what do you want as a jewelry and making something that is more personalized had an influence in your interest in small things and small objects?
Definitely. And I have underestimated this field a lot. I always had a dislike to jewelry designing. That's why I moved into sculpture. I thought jewelry was not artistic enough. And I always thought I'm not a designer. And I like conceptual works. I want to have reasons to do what I do. This is where my head is too big. And which I'm also trying to unlearn that. So this is before, when I was studying jewelry design, it was always this discourse. Why does that improve other people's lives? Why do I work in luxurious goods? And it's just the pretty little things that's a bit expensive. What's the use of that? It doesn't contribute anything. This is what I used to think. But I really like the learning of the materials, the handcrafts. I did 3 years of jewelry designing study in USA at the Rhode Island School of Design. And afterwards, I went to Germany and did the serious apprenticeship under a goldsmith for 2 years. And then I continued my master studies. And in the middle of the master studies, I started to study sculpture. And then in the time when I was doing apprenticeship, I really learned the basics. How to make metal, how to make tools, how to really work to make set diamonds and golden things and working with clients and all these things. But serious small scale and all purely handmade jewelry pieces, not the casted mass production. And then the sculpture study has actually brought me to understand, connect people to my artwork more. Because I started to work with performance, I started to work with human body, with interactions, participatory things, and also relational art. It has made me think the relationship, closeness between objects and persons, which I did not think about when I was making jewelry. I was trying to make something look good and did not connect it to people. But I had always questioned why, if I don't connect my work to people, why do I make jewelry? It can be sculpture. And this is why I went into sculpture. And when I went to sculpture, I started to think more about like people and society. And then I realized, well, then actually jewelry is amazing. It's really on people. It's about people. It connects people, evokes conversations. I'm starting to think, well, they're also carryable and mobile. All this, because everything I do is ephemeral. So I am troubling as an artist, how do I leave some kind of commodity? Shipping containers will become much more expensive. Could it be the artwork's going to also go tiny and virtual and visual and all this? Virtual art is good, but I guess as a maker, I'm spending a lot of time on computer. It's not pleasing for me. I still like to work with materials. Something that makes you feel sure should also be materialized, and that can be carried on body. So I'm starting to think, okay, maybe the answer at the end is jewelry then, or
How were you using your living spaces at home, and how this has changed during your lockdown experience?
I have always been using my home space as my studio. It has always been a place where I work and I live, so it didn't change much. The only thing that changed is that I didn't have to travel so often. And another thing it changed my life is that we do Zoom a lot. So I have become much more digital. I spend much longer time in front of computer than I used to, and spend less time waiting at the airport or train stations.
What type of value do you give to objects, and how this has changed during your lockdown experience?
This is very interesting that because I spent a lot of time at home, I had time to really go through what do I really need. I always wanted to do a serious cleanup, and it gave me time to go through and clean up. This was fantastic experience to understand what I needed and what I didn't need, and that I really needed more space that I can breathe and make work and live longer, because so much time was spent at home. And I cannot live in a place that's so cluttered and chaotic. I like to have more kind of order where I live. So this changed, and I have established a wonderful relationship to my plants. In case when you always move around, you cannot have many plants.
What does sociable objects means to you, and what does it make you think they were sociable objects?
Well, sociable objects for me is objects that make people come together and discuss about some specific aspect, allow things to people to experience things together, experience a moment of connectedness. In my case, I'm particularly interested in this sense of belonging, anchoring, uprooting, nomadism, diaspora. So these are the topics, and that I bring things allow me to access internal personal views of what's really going on if you're in the situations, in the experiences. So it has always been my method to access some people's subjective side through the objects, to understand the psychological side through objects. And then I am creating these to be shared in the public space and bringing people into a kind of a temporary community to experience, share, and probably process it in some strange ways. This as an artwork will continue to evoke thought to people to reflect on these things. So to me, that's kind of social objects in a way of connecting internal, external, among people. That's how I see them.